Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first session of the day on Certification Saturday in the Azure AI and Data track. It's entitled The Microsoft Security Maze, or the Certification Maze Demystified. We've got an hour for the session. There isn't an hour's content in the session, so it'll be about 35-40 minutes and then questions after that. Do feel free to ask questions at any time. Just take yourself off mute and ask a question. There's no need to wait for me. Feel free to interrupt at any time. This is being recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, then please leave the meeting. Good morning again. My name is Ed Baker, and I'm your speaker today. I've been doing this sort of stuff an awful long time. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. I used to work for Microsoft as a technical evangelist a few years ago, and when I left, I became a Microsoft MVP, a most valued professional, specifically for Microsoft Intune. So I'm all about devices, identity, security, and access, those sort of things. I'm multi-qualified, or certificated, I should say. I've probably taken, I don't know, probably about 150, 160 Microsoft exams. I've probably got about 60 or 70 certs at the moment, including all the Office ones I hold. I write courses for Microsoft, I write exams for Microsoft, and I write my own courses as well. I've recently been appointed as a founder member of the Microsoft Certifications Advisory Council, trying to shape Microsoft's future certification so it's good for you as well as good for Microsoft. If you ever need to contact me, that's the quickest email address to get hold of me on, ed@ed-baker.com. I'm on Twitter at edbaker1965, and my LinkedIn profile is just there. Feel free to connect if you want to. Let's get on with what we're here to talk about today, though, which is the Microsoft Security Certification Maze. Up until very recently, it wasn't a maze at all. It was very simple. There were 2 exams, and those exams covered Azure and they covered Microsoft 365. But the maze now contains the following set of exams. We've got the Security, Compliance and Identity Fundamentals exam. It's still in beta. It's unlikely to leave beta until close to the end of, perhaps end of April, early May. I took the exam in February. It's still in the beta period. You can still take it, but it's full price to take the exam in beta if you want to. The only difference for you in beta is that you don't get the results straight away. You have to wait for the exams to be clarified and scored, and you might get some questions in there that aren't as high quality as the generally available exam. That's the purpose of the beta, to make sure that all the questions are valid and the exam works well as an exam. So that's a basic across the board fundamentals exam. It's not a role-based exam. There's no prerequisites to take it at all, but we'll dig into each exam as we go on. Then we have the 2 exams, the role-based exams that were introduced a couple of years ago, that formed the whole of the security engineer focus really in the past, and that was the Azure Security Engineer Associate, the AZ 500 exam, which was a very, very broad exam, and we'll look at the content of that a little later. And also the Microsoft 365 Security Admin Associate, which again covered all of the topics within Microsoft 365 in relation to security. So Azure Active Directory on through down, DLP and identity protection, etc. And awful lot of detail in both of those exams. So we then move on to the new security engineer specific specialist role-based exams. These again are all in beta. I took these in February as well. I had a busy February for exams, probably took about 10 exams in February. And we've got 3 focuses. We've got the security operations exam for SC 200, the identity and access exam for SC 300, which, as you might imagine, is very focused on Azure Active Directory and all the premium features of Azure AD. And we've got the information protection exam at SC 400, which is more of an M365 exam than an Azure exam. Now, immediately you're going to say, why have we got all that? And why have we got all these new exams in the maze? So we've got the fundamentals. That's fairly obvious. There was no fundamentals security exam. Up until now, the only Azure and Microsoft 365 dedicated fundamentals are the AZ900 and the MS900, which cover all topics, including security. Microsoft then went on a bit of a binge and started developing a lot of fundamentals exams. So you've got the data exam, the AI exam. There's about 6 or 7, lots of DP exams. There's about 6 or 7 current fundamentals exams. And so they've added this one that covers the whole of the security arena, really, from Microsoft 365, Azure, and Identity. And then they've split out all the other individual roles. And the way they do this is that Microsoft look at a topic, or they look at an area of functionality, and they go and hold what's called a job task analysis. And they look at it and they say, we're thinking of creating a role. And if we look at the SC200, there are people out there that do the job of security operations analyst. What does that job involve? Specifically in the Microsoft arena, you would imagine it would involve using Azure security features such as Sentinel and all the Defender products. So they hold a meeting. It's a very long meeting. I've been involved in some of these, and they last 3 days, 4 days, up to a week sometimes. Historically, we used to go to Seattle for that, but now it's all done on Teams very late at night. And a group of subject matter experts come together and they produce a task list in the Microsoft arena for what the security operations analyst does. And they leave out everything else. Now that role is then, from that task list, they come up with a role definition, which we'll look at all these role definitions and we'll look at the task lists as we go on. And from that job task analysis, 2 things spring out: the role and the list of tasks. The role is then produced to find out whether that's 1 exam, 2 exams, 3 exams. So some roles, the enterprise administrator in Microsoft 365 is 2 exams. One is identity and access and one is services and security. Other roles are 1 exam. So the Azure administrator is now 1 exam. It used to be 2, but it's now 1 exam. All of these new roles are single exam roles. There are no sets of 2 exams where you have to pass both to get the certification. There are also no prerequisite certifications for these. So if you take any one of these exams, you will get the role certification based on that exam. So if you take the SC200 and are successful, you become a certified Microsoft Security Operations Analyst Associate, which is a big mouthful. So these 3 exams, SC200, SC300, and SC400, are specialist associate level exams. They're not expert level exams. The exam topics are held at what's known as the associate level, but it's a specialist exam. And you'll find that they come under the Microsoft Security Engineer specialism. With the job task analysis, we've now got our role and we've got our exam. From the job task list, we end up with the content of that exam. Something called the objective domain, again, which we'll look at shortly, is created, and a list of things that the examiner will ask questions on are included in that objective domain. From the same job task list, we head off to the training side of the fence, and Microsoft then go and create instructor-led training courses, which people like me as Microsoft certified trainers are authorized to teach, and that contains the content from that job task analysis. So since they brought out the role-based certifications, the training and the exams are 100% matched. Historically, that wasn't the case. The old mock courses was about 50–60% of the exam content was in the course. The rest was supposed to come with you as a prerequisite as a student, or as extra information the trainer would be able to give you. That's not the case anymore. The topics in the exam are 100% covered by the course. That doesn't mean it's only that in the course. So some courses have extra material in, but everything you need for the exam should be covered in the course. They're not yet released, and I haven't seen the content for any of these courses. So at the moment, we've got 4 new exams with no courseware to support it. So those are the 4 new exams in the maze, which gives us this 6 exam list. And immediately you would look at that and say, well, we already had the AZ 500, and we had the MS 500. And all of these, or these two exams, cover all of the topics from these four exams. There is nothing in these four exams that does not exist in one of the other two exams. So why have we got them? What is the purpose of this? Or what we should really say is, what are Microsoft playing at by producing a subset of exams when we can take one and we've got all the content in the others? And are these exams going to replace the MS 500 and the AZ 500? Well, the answer to that is squarely and firmly no. Microsoft firmly believe there's a place for all of these in the market, and there is a place for people who want to specialize and people who want to generalize. So we've got no plan at all to replace the MS 500 or the AZ 500. Each individual certification does not replace all of the objectives in either of those exams. So you can take one as a specialist or one as a generalist. And we're going to dig into all of these. The question for you, though, and probably the reason you're listening to this, either recorded or live, is, so what should I take? What exams should I take and what should I do? I'm fairly new to the arena. What on earth should I do? And the only way you're going to work that one out is to have a look at that exam objective domain, which lists for you the skills needed to pass the exam. And then as a secondary element, go and have a look at the role description to see if that's the sort of thing you do as a job or could do as a job or want to do as a job, because certification is an excellent way of getting yourself ready to take on a new role if you've got a certification in that area. So to do that, we're going to dive a bit deeper into the maze. The first one we're going to look at is SC 900, Security, Compliance and Identity Fundamentals. And you'll see that that covers all three topics from the other three exams. Now, when Microsoft create this objective domain, they break it up into functional areas. So we've got an OD with FAs, lots of three-letter or 2- and 3-letter acronyms in Microsoft certification. The objective domain is split into, in this case, these 4 functional areas or skill areas, and the percentages you see alongside each of these functional areas, it relates to the number of questions you're likely to receive in each exam you take. So whenever you take the SC 900, you're likely to get a third of the exam in security solutions and up to a third of the exam in identity and access. But security concepts, compliance, identity concepts is only between 5 and 10%. But the rest of the exam is fairly well split between identity, security, and compliance. Now, underneath that is a detailed set of tasks. And to do that, we're just going to have a quick look at the SC 900 detailed set of tasks. I've got some links here, which I'll put at the end of the deck for you, and I'll make the deck available online. But if we look at the SC 900 set of tasks, if you go to the Microsoft certification website and you search for security engineer, you'll find this. Each one of these exams is listed up here. We've got the fundamentals exam and we've got the associate level exams. And if you click on one of these, let's click on SC 200 to start, you will end up looking at the exam page or the certification page, which will take you to some online learning, which is from Microsoft Learn, which is absolutely excellent. And it will also take you to the exam page. So if you want to go to the exam page to book the exam, you can do that. But on the certification, because this is a single page certification, it gives you the skills measured and the ability to download this skills outline. And I've gone and done that already for you. This is the skills outline or the objective domain. And so it gives us these skills measured. The exams traditionally only cover general availability topics. Now, those are topics that exist only in paid for scenarios and available for production. However, if there is a topic that is in preview and is in general use they could be covered. So as an example, Azure Active Directory was in preview probably for up to 2 years, and that was regularly covered in exams. There are lots of features in this particular security area that will be covered that are preview features. So don't only focus your learning across all the exams on general availability. Anything that's up for preview is a valid option. So here we've got our skills measured for the SC900, apologies, and the top topic is concepts of security, compliance and identity, of which we got 5 to 10%. You need to know what Microsoft's zero trust methodology and ideas are. You need to understand about shared responsibility and defense in depth. They're not hugely technical topics. There's nothing you can actually do with them, but you need to go and read about them and understand what Microsoft's approach is, because you could be asked a question, a very vague question, which one of these could be the answer. Now, if you've got between 40, let's say you've got between 40 and 60 questions in every exam, let's go for 50 because that's a nice round number. If I've got 10% of my questions from this section, I could have up to 5 questions on security, concepts, methodologies, and principles. You need to go and have a look at the Service Trust Portal, understand what Microsoft's privacy principles are for its customers. Then we move into each individual area for identity and access, security solutions, and compliance solutions. I'm not going to go through every one on every slide because you can do that yourself. What I am going to do is just have a look at a couple of these in each set of topics, just so you get the sort of idea that it's going to cover. So for instance, you could describe this section as the Azure Active Directory section, because that's Microsoft's identity and access management solution. So what is Azure Active Directory? What identities can you have? How can you make a hybrid identity? What type of users can you have? How do you create them? Moving on to things like Hello for Business. What is that? What's Windows Hello for Business? How does it work? How can you make it work? And then self-service password reset. Notice all of these are describe or define. They're quite high-level topics. You're not being asked to do anything. You're being asked to tell me what it is. So the questions will be focused on what is it and what does it do, rather than how do you do it. At the fundamental level, you only get an hour or so for the exam, and you get lots of questions. So these questions are short, they're sharp, and they're not too technically detailed. As I say, I've taken all these exams and I found them some of the best exams Microsoft have put out for a very long time. Far fewer typos, far fewer questions that were confusing to me or questions I didn't agree with. Not that's to say that when I disagree with a question, I'm right, but often in an exam you'll get a question you think, well, that's not right, whether it is or not. So just be aware, in the 900 fundamentals level exams, you're not going to be thinking too deeply about the questions. Looking at the role for 900, it's not a true role-based exam. It's just a fundamentals level, no prerequisites at all. Anybody can take the exam. And it's targeted at anybody looking across all of the layers of security, compliance, and identity. Very broad audience, can be technical, can be business, can be sales, can be marketing, doesn't really matter. But you should already be familiar with Azure and Microsoft 365 and want to understand more about the end-to-end security. So that's our starting point. If you're a beginner, you want to go there. I'm going to take the next 3 exams in number order. For me, this is probably the wrong order because I'm an identity guy. I would take 300, but SC200, of all the exams I took in this series, SC200 was by far the hardest one for me. It covers Azure Sentinel and all the Azure Defender products built into the Security Center. It also covers Microsoft 365 Defender. So this is not only an Azure exam, it's a Microsoft 365 exam. It's the one exam of the specialisms that is really difficult to classify. You couldn't just take this exam and pass it if you're not a Microsoft 365 administrator, really, because you need to know about a third of the exam is on Microsoft 365 Defender. And of course, Microsoft 365 Defender used to be called Microsoft Threat Protection. Okay. Azure Defender is the security center subscription, if you like. It's just been renamed Azure Defender. Okay. Used to be the Azure Security Center standard version. We'll have a look at the skills measured in that one as well, but the role of this one is particularly interesting. This is a role-based exam, and it's squarely aimed at security ops analysts, people who spend their day tracking, hunting, investigating issues around security in your environment. So you need to know in detail Azure Sentinel. And that's probably the one product you need to know more than any of the others. The Azure Sentinel questions go very, very deep, right down into the Custo query language, into hunting, into notebooks, into all the areas of Azure Sentinel. If you don't and haven't used Microsoft 365 Defender, you need to dig deep into that as well. Most people using Azure will be familiar with the Security Center. They'll just need to refamiliarize themselves with the new Defender naming and what elements of Security Center comes on Defender. If we have a look at the elements built in, go and have a look at SC200. Again, preview features, if they're commonly used, are going to be included. This is relatively rare for Microsoft exams. Most exams are focused primarily on GA features, but this is focused on preview features as well. So the first area is a third of the exam will be on Microsoft Defender for Office 365. Which is the 365 Defender. They've changed the name as well. So we're looking at products like Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, how you can deal with those. So you're going to be in the security and compliance and the security center for Microsoft 365. So a third of your exam is Microsoft 365 here. Also going to be looking at Defender for Endpoint, and Defender for Endpoint used to be called Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection. Your Microsoft Security Center now has a whole area dedicated to endpoint. It's relatively brand new, last couple of months. It's not in the Security and Compliance Center, it's only in the Security Center. And you need to know about all the threat indicators, the threat analytics, and how to use that product as well. It's also got conditional access, it's got identity protection. It's got all sorts of identity threats in here as well that you would need to be able to identify. So it does cross the boundaries a little bit. And there's also some cloud app security work in here too. So it covers a whole range of information. Moving on to Azure Defender, pretty much standard stuff in Azure Defender, how to onboard things onto Defender, how to drop the agents onto the machines, how to collect the information from each one, how to connect third-party clouds as well, AWS and Google Cloud Platform. And the final section, Sentinel, how to control Sentinel. 40 to 45% of your exam is on Sentinel. If you're not a Sentinel guru, you're going to struggle with this exam. Having done it, I use Sentinel as one of my favorite products, and I found an awful lot of questions that really tested me. Of all the exams I took in this series, if I'm not successful in any of them, it would be this one I probably wasn't successful in. You need some Linux knowledge, you need to know about syslog, you need to know about common event format, collections, all sorts of different Sentinel tools. So that's SC200. My personal favourite of all of these, as you might imagine, is the SC300. This is the identity and access exam. There's again 4 sections in here. There's one small one for management of apps, how you manage apps in Azure Active Directory. But the rest of it is focused squarely in your identity and your identity governance. So we're looking at identity management, access and authentication, and identity governance. The role for this one, is firmly around people using Azure Active Directory, people responsibility for providing security in identity, security and authentication. So conditional access plays a large part in this exam, as does multi-factor authentication. So if we move into SC 300, again, GA and preview features are covered. 25 to 30% on Azure Active Directory roles, custom domains, hybrid identity, configuring all your settings, creating, managing users and groups. Concentrate quite hard here on dynamic groups, specifically dynamic queries. When you create a dynamic group in Azure Active Directory, you can click and point and add things in, but you've got some Boolean options. You've got ands and ors for your rules. You need to know how those are worked out, whether you've got several ors and ands, how they're processed. Is it and or and? Work that one out. That's quite a tricky set of questions you could get there. All about licensing. Not many Microsoft exams have license questions. This one does have some licensing questions in, not only allocating licenses, but actually doing things with them. And notice here, because this is an associate level, not a fundamental level, it's all about doing, not describing. Configure, manage, create. So you need to know how to do these things. And there's no better way of learning than going and getting yourself a trial tenant, sign up for a free trial, and go and build this stuff. We need to look at adding our Active Directory Connect solution in, how you install it. This is a fairly large area in hybrid. Understanding Azure Active Directory Connect, understanding all the detail around the synchronization service, possibly even the rules editor. It goes quite deep. ADFS, if you don't know anything about ADFS, you need to understand how to implement and manage ADFS and when you would use ADFS. As an example, ADFS is only really required if you're using either smart cards to get in, or you want device write back for conditional access. You don't really need ADFS for any other reason than that. Connect Health, P1 feature, of course, in Azure AD. You need to understand about Azure Active Directory Connect Health for both domain services and ADFS, as well as synchronization errors. Specifically, troubleshooting your synchronization errors. If you've got any attributes that are duplicated, you'll end up with errors, or any of the key attributes, I should say, and you need to know how to handle those, and indeed how Azure Active Directory handles them and what it will name them. We then move into MFA and authentication. So using our FIDO keys and passwordless, that's fairly new. Passwordless has now gone GA in Azure AD, so expect passwordless questions and FIDO questions as well for your authentication keys. Know about smart passwords, know about password protection. So you've got the smart lockout and you've got the banned custom and banned password lists, which is a premium feature for on-premises. Your security defaults. It's going to ask you about security defaults and when you might use those. Obviously, if you're going to use conditional access, you need to turn your security defaults off. So that's one area we need to look at. And conditional access is a huge part of this exam. You need to be understanding and playing with conditional access a lot. And of course, we've got identity protection. Tiny section on apps, single sign-on apps, registering apps, using Cloud App Discovery for apps. And then identity governance. Now, identity governance is a third of your exam, and it's a fairly new section in Azure. Identity governance covers access reviews, it covers privileged identity management, and it covers access packages. If you've not used access packages, you should be thinking about it and go and play with those in identity governance. Identity governance and identity protection are both P2 features. You will get asked about Premium 1, Premium 2, what appears where. Not particularly fair questions, but you will get asked about what features of Azure Active Directory are in each. Notice here we've got plan. It's quite a high level set of questions. So not doing it, but planning it. So plan and implement. So there will be questions about, you plan to do this, what is your first step, what might you do? It might not be asking you about how to do something, but what consideration you would give to doing in what order. And of course, privileged identity management, not only for Azure AD, but for Azure resources as well. Your owners and your contributors, you can do privileged identity management for that as well. And of course, the good old global administrator break glass accounts. What are they? How do you manage them? How many should you have? What's Microsoft recommendation for numbers of global administrators? All those sort of features, all in the Microsoft Learn content and will be in the courses. So that's SC300. Again, very fair exam, quite complicated, lots and lots of areas, but they're all focused about identity and access. The last exam of the new set is specifically focused on all those, I call them the itty bitty bits in Microsoft 365. So data loss protection, information governance, information protection, all those tools that are from historically come from Exchange and Exchange Online, but have now been brought up to tenant level and now cover all the products like SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, Teams, and you can do DLP, information protection and information governance across all of those. Only 3 areas in this exam, pretty much even across, although information protection does cover most of it. The role for this exam is all about information protection. You'd have to be, I believe, a fairly large organization to have people's only role is information protection. So this is a very specialist exam and a specialist certification, working with compliance, working with security, but they would be responsible only for the information protection areas. So you would be defining your requirements, testing your processes, testing your operations to make sure that all those policies work and that there's no loss of data, no information leakage. If that's your role, if that's where you're going, then we need to be looking at the objective domain for this exam, which is the SC 400 exam. Oops, too many. And again, GA and preview features. There's quite a lot of changes to this system, quite a lot of preview features in here as well. So we first of all look at sensitive information. Now, sensitive information are produced for label, managed through labels in this product and done in the security or security and compliance center. So it's all about compliance of information. And you go and create yourself a security label, which you can then apply, or a sensitivity label, I should say, which can have lots of different types of data in. So maybe driving license or credit cards or national insurance numbers from lots and lots of areas of the world, lots of different countries, types of data are stored there. If there isn't one pre-created, you can create your own. So it's all about sensitivity. It's all about matching your data to those sensitivity labels and then deciding what you want to do against them. Creating and managing trainable classifiers up until very, very recently has been a preview feature. There aren't many trainable classifiers. It's a brand new feature. Go and have a look at it. It allows you to train your system to identify things that are specific to your environment. Okay, so you can use machine learning, if you like, in the background, Microsoft 365 machine learning, to pull out things that aren't really sensitive for anybody else, but would be sensitive for you. We've got the sensitivity labels, which we can apply. This really was part of Azure Information Protection. Azure Information Protection obviously works under Azure RMS, so you need to know about Azure RMS. Azure Information Protection for the Azure side of it, but also sensitivity labels for the Microsoft 365 side of it, because you can apply those using the new unified labeling client, as opposed to the AIP client, to run in all your Office apps to apply these labels to protect your documents. Obviously, we're looking at SMIME and we're looking at Office Advanced Message Encryption as well. 2 different types of encryption for your emails. Go and have a read about those and understand what SMIME is as opposed to Office Advanced Message Encryption. and the reader for the advanced encryption solution as well. Then we look at DLP, Microsoft's DLP running across Exchange, running across SharePoint and OneDrive, how you can prevent data from being removed from your environment based on its content. And cloud app security comes into this as well, integrating cloud app security. How do you connect your cloud app security product to your Microsoft 365 tenants to gain insight into all this information? And finally, information governance, looking at retention. So Microsoft's retention solution, in Exchange, we've got retention policy tags and retention policies. You need to know about the 3 different types of tags, your defaults, your personals, all those types of tags, when you'd use them, how you'd use them, where you'd use them, how your users can add them, how they're applied to mailboxes, when they aren't applied to mailboxes, how you have to force that to happen, online archiving as well, which licenses give you online archiving and which don't. And then in Microsoft 365, specifically in SharePoint, there is a topic called records. Records are basically any document that is vital to your business that you want to identify as a record, something you want to keep and not lose and maintain control of. And you can have different types of record management. You need to understand all about automatic record management and automatic record control within SharePoint. It's very itty bitty, nothing really fits together with that. They're all in the same topic, but the products don't link like other products link in other parts of the exams. Very fair exam, very usable. So those are all the specialist exams. If we move on to what we had in the past, now I took this exam for the first time. I actually wrote some questions for the original exam years and years ago, but I took this exam a couple of weeks ago. I had an Ignite voucher to use and it was going to expire 2 days later. So I'll take an exam, took this exam, very fair exam, covers an awful lot of areas. But notice here it covers identity and access, so the SC 300. It covers threat protection and information protection and compliance from the SC 400. So it covers 2 areas that the other exam covers. Doesn't really cover much in Azure apart from a bit on AIP and a little bit on Azure Active Directory for your identity and access, a lot on identity and access. Now, the role for this exam is a broad role as well. So it's a security administrator across the whole of Microsoft 365, covering identity, covering threat protection, covering security management and data governance. So if you want to prove your skills in that area, that's the Microsoft 365 exam for you. And it covers areas from all 3 pretty much of the other exams because it does cover some of the Microsoft Defender products. The objective domain here, this exam was updated about a week before I took it. So it's very up to date. Again, most GA, but the odd little bit of a preview. There weren't many preview features in this. But again, we're going through hybrid and Azure AD Connect. That was in the SC 300. Authentication, single sign-on. That was in the 300. Conditional access. That was in the 300. Identity, privilege management, role-based access, all that. So if you take the SC 300, you've got a pretty good chance of getting at least 30 to 50% of this exam as well. Because this is a generalist rather than the specialist exam, they're slightly higher level questions. Threat protection's in here, as is information protection, covering your sensitivity, covering DLP, cloud app, quite a bit more on cloud app security, specifically in this exam. Even though cloud app security is covered in odds and ends in the others, there's a detailed section on this that you would need to know. And then, of course, we've got governance and compliance, auditing, reporting. It goes a little bit deeper into those. So not everything in this exam is covered by the others, which is one of the reasons they're keeping MS 500. Okay. And last exams, AZ 500. This is a very, very broad exam, but again, you can see we've got identity and access. A third of it is on Azure Active Directory effectively. Whole third on Azure Active Directory. Security Ops, it covers a little bit about Sentinel and a little bit about the other areas of Security Ops, and then it covers how to secure your data and your applications. A small amount on platform protection. This is a very broad security engineer role, not designed as SecOps, not designed as identity and access. It covers pretty much everything, which is another reason Microsoft are keeping it, because it's got areas that are not covered by the SC exams. And if we have a look at the final exam here, this again was updated on the 23rd of March. So identity and access, lots on groups. Again, remember those, how to create dynamic groups, what the group policy group queries are, how to connect to Azure AD Connect, pass-through authentication, passwordless, pass-through, etc. Quite a bit on Azure Firewall and Firewall Manager and Front Door. None of those appear in any of the other exams. Web application firewall in an app gateway, Azure Bastion. All these features are unique to AZ500. You won't find those in any of the others. All these areas you might, although a little bit on container registries. It's so broad, this exam, even down to Kubernetes services. Security Ops, you will find Azure Monitor, Azure Security Center, Azure Sentinel, and security policies, including blueprints, are pretty much straight out of the SC200, as are a lot of the securing data and apps in here. But the bottom line, I've got a couple of minutes left. The bottom line is that security has become a major focus for Microsoft, absolutely major focus. In their new world of certifications, if you look at the new certification poster, which we'll have a look at in a second, there's a whole new section specifically for security. Doesn't apply to any of the other areas of their certifications. And there's room in that section for beginners, specialists, and generalists. So they've placed all of those exams under the security specialism. SC 900 is your beginner exam. As a generalist, you're going to be aiming at AZ 500 or MS 500, depending on which is your product suite. And if you specialize, 200 for security ops, which is mostly Azure, 300 for identity and access, which is an awful lot of Microsoft 365, but obviously heavily into Azure Active Directory as well, and some Defender products. And then information protection is exclusively Microsoft 365 for your compliance and security and data loss prevention. We have a final look just before we go to questions on the security poster, which has disappeared. I had it up, I had it loaded. Where's it gone? Oh, it's disappeared. I'll move to questions and I'll go and find that for you. If you head off to questions, any questions, anybody on anything really, on any of those products, on Microsoft certifications generally, taking exams, MCT program if you're interested, the regional lead program, or even MVP program if you want any questions at all. Happy to answer questions on anything at all. Or not, no need to ask questions if you don't want to. If there are no questions, I'll try and find the poster, which I had about 5 minutes ago, and move on. Oh, thank you, Sachin. Training cert poster, excellent. Let me copy that. I do like Microsoft's aka.ms. There we go. So right at the bottom, we've got security and compliance and identity. All those exams are now in that area. They're duplicated in a sense in that you'll find them in the Azure and in the Microsoft 365, but we've got 4 pillars. We've got Azure 365 Dynamics and Power Platform with the specific expert and associate level exams there. There's then the specialty exams, which Microsoft have produced, one for SAP, one for Windows Virtual Desktop, and one for IoT developers, all in the Azure area. And then there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 other fundamental exams, 3 in Azure, 1 in Microsoft 365, 3 Dynamics, and 1 in Power Platform. And then you've got the extra fundamental exam in its own area under security and compliance and identity. So they've brought out this brand new section specifically for security in the last 3 months or so. Okay, that's me done. If there's any questions, I'm happy to stay and answer them. Otherwise, I'll hand it back to Julian for introducing the next session, which I think is Tiago on all Microsoft certificates.